Hey, thank you. I am excited to speak here to the Ventures group. I am really excited about this project. I love the heart behind this. Todd was explaining some of it to me. I love what this group's doing. Thanks for the invite here to be into the space. Through the Church Digital and through Stadia Church Planting, we've been on, well, let's just call it a journey of discovering digital church, the strengths and the weaknesses, the pros and the cons to digital church. And let's be honest, as much as the digital lure is to brag about these massive numbers of reach where we've got people that are watching 2 seconds of a Facebook Live video. Just be honest, that's not the point. The success of a digital church doesn't come in that massive reach number. It really comes in engagement. It comes in a two-way conversation among people. It comes basically down to discipling individuals in digital space through the journey, once again, of digital church. We've got the opportunity to engage with, I don't know, the small town girl who's living in the lonely world, the girl who took the midnight train. Yeah, so she's really the goal. She's the point of this whole thing at digital church. But it's more than just the small town girl. We really also want to connect with that city boy, the guy from South Detroit. These people have value. And for a digital church to succeed, the digital church needs to understand the value of these individuals. Truthfully, if there was a small town girl and there was a city boy, well, the reality is they probably would not find the answers they were looking for in a physical church building. Well, first off, event-based evangelism is waning. We're not seeing much success for that now, post-COVID. Maybe it was dying pre-COVID. Some people have different opinions on that. The majority of lost people really are not interested in coming to the building anymore mid-COVID, post-COVID. I don't know that they were pre-COVID either. That's another thing. But after all, if you really drill into the story, our two friends were taking the midnight train. They were walking up and down the boulevard. They were searching at night. The majority of our physical buildings, well, practically speaking, are shut down. Now, if our friends were looking for answers at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, yeah, we got answers then. But the rest of the time, their physical church anyway, is kind of quiet. No, digital church is open 24/7, 365, but that's another conversation we'll get to in a little bit, because from practically speaking, to reach a different type of person, we need to utilize a different method. One digital church planter told me that they were seeing 80% unchurched people come to their physical service, or excuse me, their digital service. 80% unchurched people attending a digital online service. Phenomenal numbers. It was majority atheists. A second digital church planter told me recently that they were seeing 70%, but this is de-church. These are people that used to be with church, got burned by the church, and their first step to re-engage with the bride of Christ comes in the form of a digital church. Some really exciting things that are happening in digital church space. So you're thinking about getting started on this digital church journey. I'm going to encourage you, don't stop there. Let's keep going. But let me give you some tips here for your journey ahead. Tip number one, let's start it off simple. A digital community is a community worthy of a church. Community used to be defined by physical locations. If you knew where all those street lights were located in your town, then you probably knew where the church was, because there's always a church in the physical community. And that's the community, that's the church that you would attend. It was based off of geographical location. Digital community looks different. 22 million people regularly play a video game called Final Fantasy 14. Now, they're not doing that because they want to really beat up the big bad. As a matter of fact, one thing you need to realize, Final Fantasy 14 came out in September 2010. 22 million people still play a video game that's 10 years old. Why? Because that's where their friends are. That's where they find community. That's where they're part of a guild. That's where the group hangs out and engages and has conversation. You see, digital community has evolved into different shapes. The church refuses to define community digitally, therefore is not a part of it. And I'm suggesting for a digital church to succeed, we need to engage in places like this MMO video game, Final Fantasy 14, and become a church that's willing to engage and have conversations and meet people in digital space through relationships. Culture has redefined technology. Church, we just need to adjust to it. By the way, number two here, it's not digital communications. I want to start right here. We're not asking to do digital communications. We're trying to do digital church. Digital communications is, hey, we're using cloud-based tools, we're using social media, but we want to drive people to a physical location for disciple making. Hey, that's a great plan. It's not a church. You're not doing digital church. You're not doing church in digital space. If you want to do church in digital space, you're recognizing, hey, this is a community that we should be in. And so let us do discipleship in that space digitally. If you want to do discipleship physically, that's great. Launch a physical church. Utilize digital tools to drive people to that physical location. But if you're doing a digital church, you're recognizing that this is our opportunity to do disciple making practices, discipleship, whatever your language is, doing it digitally. That's the goal. So we're on this digital church journey. Let me give you some street lights. Let me give you some guides. Let me give you, hey, one standard. Here is your standard for you to operate your church under. Online to offline. Simply put, the gospel that we learn in our online world, it has to affect our offline relationships. Otherwise, we're creating consumers. Now, let's unpack this a little bit. The fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I think I got them all there. So if I'm exuding that, I'm showing that in digital space. I'm part of a digital church. I am being this guy digitally. Physically, I'm abusive to my wife, verbally abusive to my kids, and I steal from the workplace. What type of Christian am I? What type of person am I? Words like fraud, hypocrite, worse actually come to mind. So the goal is not to be bifurcated, to have digital and physical different. The goal is for it to match. The gospel that we're hearing in our online digital world, it has to be driven to our physical relationships. I mean, it's even a biblical concept. Let's look at this. James 1:22. Do not just be hearers of the word, I'm paraphrasing here, online, and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says, once again paraphrasing, in the real world. Don't just be hearers of the word online and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says in the real world. I mean, let's look at our friend, the small town girl here. All right, so hey, she's got an opportunity to be that Christian digitally. Good for her. That's great. But to move her beyond just being a consumer to where that it's part of her life, we need to start challenging her in physical spaces, maybe even discipling her to the place where she can be on mission. I don't know, in those smoky rooms that smell of cheap perfume, to be on mission to reach the people that are part of her life, to be that light for others that need to hear it. Well, you're working hard here. Like this is a crazy talk, right? We need to wrap up before this talk goes on and on and on. And let me give you one caution to help you win and not lose at digital church planting. Recognize this up front. Technology left to itself is distant. It's cold. Be aware of the technology's strengths and weaknesses. Understand how the technology works and how it interacts with people. Work hard, though, to overcome the weaknesses. As a default, the more technology you use, the more human touch, the more human interaction you're going to need to provide to counteract with the coldness of the technology. Do not get sucked into the trap that so many churches have done of creating content. A digital church is more than creating content. You are building relationships. You are disciple making happening. And that comes when you build community. And you need to move beyond living just to find that emotion and instead start to move to get people on mission. Well, hey, it's been a great time. I hope this has been good for you. And thanks for the invite.